Hi, friends. Welcome back to a Raising Wild Hearts podcast. This is the last interview from the Rise and Flourish event. Our guest today, Stasia Jaramillo, was one of the phenomenal speakers. And we have a guest host again today, my dear friend Danielle Neufeld. She and her husband, Greg, co-host a podcast I love called The Most Important Thing. It's about family leadership and culture at home. It's inspiring, quick-hitting episodes, and you can listen wherever you get your podcasts or at tmitpod.com. I'll link that down in the description below. Today, Danielle is sitting down with Stasia, and they are talking all about the subconscious mind. Stasia is a subconscious healer and a spiritual teacher who helps women release limiting beliefs, yes, please, and rewire their subconscious minds through a process called theta healing. Stasia's interview episode with me is the most popular episode I have ever recorded. So after you listen to this short but sweet interview, if you haven't heard Stasia's full episode, I will link that below as well. So today, Danielle and Stasia are also talking about how our subconscious programming shapes not only our lives, but our children's lives and everyone around us, and how we, as the mamas doing the work, can ripple through generations to come. So I love this conversation so much. There's some light bulb moments, lots of compassion, and reminders that our triggers and our limiting beliefs can actually be our greatest teachers. So let's jump into today's conversation with Danielle Neufeld and Stasia Jaramillo.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So when you first heard about Rise and Flourish, what encouraged you to want to get involved?
I think their mission of bringing women together, and I think specifically that a lot of the women that are here today, they're already at an elevated frequency, like they've done the inner work or they're self-aware or trying to do the inner work. And I think that when you bring those women together and empower them even more, the energy radiates and multiplies and amplifies. And so it's just beautiful, the energy here today as well. And of course, Ryan and Ashley are incredible.
Absolutely. Yeah. So your talk today is on unlocking the power of the subconscious. How did you get started with that type of work?
I've been on a spiritual journey for about a decade now, learning about mindset work and manifestation and how do we actually create our reality. And so it got me down that path, which got me deeper, and that everything stems from our subconscious mind, or 95% of our life is run automatically from our subconscious mind. And the technique that I'll be sharing about today is called theta healing. And it's essentially a technique that helps to rewire the subconscious mind and reprogram some of those root causes or limiting beliefs that are keeping us stuck, but are no longer serving us.
Very cool. And so with the focus today being on moms, what do you expect to come up as far as limiting beliefs and kind of areas of focus of your talk?
I think as moms, a lot of it is like self-care. And I would assume there's stuff about just not having time or not prioritizing time for ourselves. But I think that this talk being especially relevant to moms is that from the ages of 0 to 7 in a child, that's when most of our beliefs are formed. And so that's when a child's mind is like a sponge. And so we just take on information and so I think that would also benefit moms here, because if they are raising little ones, they're recognizing how their children's environment, including them in the household, is affecting their children. I think what's really great about this work and what's empowering to moms as well is that when we heal ourselves, then our children get to inherit our growth instead of our limitations.
Can you share a bit about the power of community in the work that you do?
When we're tying it to this event too, and what I was speaking about earlier is bringing women together who are already open, who are already doing the work, it amplifies, right? In quantum physics, like our cells, our DNAs, when we grow, when we evolve, we affect others around us, right? And so I think just like in a room like this or at an event like this, it amplifies. And so I would say community is incredibly important for that. We're not just doing the self-work in silos. We're actually seeing, hey, there are other people going through my same struggles, but are also not just taking them as like, well, that sucks, but wanting to do something about it and wanting to evolve and grow.
It's beautiful. I love thinking about, tapping into this energy as a community of moms, each being the central force in our families. And so coming together and amplifying that energy, as you say, and then going back to our own families, like the reverberations are significant, right?
Mm-hmm. Especially for our children. I love what you said, mothers being the center of our families. But our children are also so susceptible. And as I mentioned, from 0 to 7, that's when they just adopt all information. Sure. But even later, it's like you are their role model, essentially, as a mom. And our children like adopt that energy. And so if they see you healing, if they do see you prioritizing yourself, taking time for self-care, like it becomes a norm to them, that becomes a practice to know to prioritize yourself, to take care of yourself.
What would you say to the mom that wasn't able to join us today at Rise and Flourish about the energy here and why she should consider the next event?
I mean, it's empowering. I think that, I'm sure there's a ton of excuses to say, oh, I didn't have time for myself, or I needed to do this, I need to do that. But I will say that what is learned and acquired in this room with hearing the speakers and just kind of the energy and amplifying that, like you carry that within you. So it's not just about today and saying, oh, I made time, I carved out these few hours. It's really with you, the information, the knowledge, the empowerment, the community beyond. And so try to make it next year.
So if there's one micro action or takeaway that you would love the women here and at home from your day today or from your presentation, what would it be?
Common theme in a couple of the talks is just to take that time to pause and to reflect, because a lot of what has come up in the previous talks today as well is like getting to the root. And this will relate later on in the day in my talk as well, is like getting to the root when you're experiencing a trigger or something's bothering you, to really lean into that. What are you feeling? Why are you feeling it? When was the first time you felt that way? And really try to get to the bottom of the root of it. Because when we can do that, we can also let it, we can acknowledge it and let it mindfulness to simplify it.
Yeah. If I understand what you're saying, I also think that there's something about like taking the things that may be in our shadow, right? That we don't necessarily want to look at and bringing them into the light. And in a sense, they lose power that way.
Absolutely.
And then ultimately we can normalize these triggers.
Absolutely.
Understand them and have them lose their power and maybe even ultimately become like a source of strength for us, recognizing that we've changed our...
You said that so well. And in my work, I talk often about triggers and actually really paying attention and focusing on your triggers, because they really can be your biggest triggers, right? And so you wouldn't be triggered by something if you didn't have it in you. And so someone could be doing something that you don't agree with, but it doesn't bother you and you could just pass it. But if something triggers on you, it triggers that emotional response. And so it's communicating with you. And I would say it's definitely something that is ready to be healed and ready to move through you.
That's beautiful. And I think as moms, that comes up so... Like I can say for myself, my oldest daughter loves to sing and dance. And at first it was super triggering for me because those were running around, dancing on the coffee table, screaming, singing at the top of your lungs. It sounds a little more like screaming. It was not allowed. And I realized over time that was actually, I like to think that I was a creative kid too, but it was allowed in my home. And so part of understanding that for me has actually allowed me to, like when I started to look at it more, not only have I softened towards her, and I've started singing and playing piano and stepping into my creativity and so I think that so many of these triggers are really like nudges from our deep inner knowing, right? That there's work to do.
Absolutely.
But then there's beauty on the other side of that.
I love that. You explain that so well. And I love that you're also like so aware of that, because when someone is being too much, right? Or like if that's triggering to someone, then really pay attention. What is it about them? Maybe there's a part of you that's actually afraid to be seen. And so you're criticizing them or judging them because it's easier for you to see it in someone else, as opposed to criticize yourself and think, I'm too shy to do that, or
it hasn't been a part we want to look at,
right?
For whatever reason. I've heard it said that pain is the touchstone of spiritual growth. And so I think learning to see some of those triggers as growth opportunities, right?
Absolutely.
Should we choose to look at them.
Absolutely. And I think it's also like a part of you that is ready to be healed, And so it's almost like it comes at the right time. where when your subconscious, your inner child,
Yes.
when like your higher self you is kind of giving you those little nudges, it's like I said, easier to see it in someone else. And so it's easing you into your own inner work, but it's essentially saying like, you're ready for this, pay
Yes.
attention to this.
I think that's the beauty of events like this, right? Because if you're here today, it's probably because you felt that nudge, right? And so you are walking into a room of women who are open right now, right? And so maybe they're wide open, maybe there's just a little sliver, but either way, I think so much of the content today so many of the lessons that we're learning, you're really speaking to a captive, receptive audience, which I think encourages all of us to be more open and just like you said, raises the frequency.
Absolutely. And I think that energy is absolutely felt in this room too. I think a lot of the women I would bet that they're going out of it like more enlightened than they came in, and I'm sure feeling lighter as well.
Yeah. What does rise and flourish mean to you in this season of your life?
Rise and flourish in this season of my life. I would really go back to community. For me, working on my business, I stepped out of corporate before starting my own business. And the big change for me is really focusing on community and that deeper connection. As opposed to it was in corporate, it was more focused on the work. And my business and my work, it truly is about connecting with the deeper parts of people, like the one-on-ones. And at a beautiful event like this, there's just so many like connections, so many organic, vulnerable, authentic conversations that are being.
Tell me if this resonates or not. Love to hear so obviously it's a different realm that you're working in right now, but what are some of the through lines? Like, have there been anything that in your previous career has really enabled you to do the work you do today? I am in venture capital, but 6 months ago, my husband and I started a podcast about family leadership and culture at home. A lot of it really comes from the fact that my first job was at a hedge fund, was in a big corporation, but the culture, even though it was hard knocks and one of excellence, there were high standards, but there was so much high support as well that I truly felt like I was sheltered, like I was doing really hard work, but that I was 100% supported in that work. And that's what I want to give to my children. So I really believe that sometimes, at least my corporate experience has really informed kind of my softer, more feminine work today about family culture, because I felt that support there, even though it was more of a finance businessy context, if you will. So I'm just curious if you had any experiences that you do pull from today, even though it's a different realm.
That's a beautiful reflection. I would say in corporate, honestly, I probably shied away a little bit from my more spiritual because at the time I kind of thought it was like, no, that's not like, the corporate vibe. Yeah, acceptable. But I think stepping out of it, I've definitely reflected on it since. And at the end of the day, they're all people behind their suits and screens. And I would say that like, I believe that almost like the higher you are in your career, whether that's corporate or, like in a leadership space, that those people are actually in tune, or at least, to an extent. And I feel like in order to become successful, and I know that success can look different for different people, but I doubt that it's really just from a place of strategy and doing all the right things, like it to have a level of inner alignment to be able to achieve a level of success. And relating it to my work now, I would say that I just see it in a different lens. And some of the leaders that I've worked with, I see them from a different lens where I can see the person behind the suit kind of thing. And so I would say that's kind of the reflection I've taken away. And I think now who I mainly work with is high achieving women. And I'm finding myself, and a lot of them are entrepreneurs, but I'm finding myself opening up to working more with corporate leaders as well.
Yeah.
And primarily I've worked with women, but I've actually had my first male client a couple of weeks ago. He owned a successful company. He was a corporate leader, and it honestly opened me up, and I was very just pleased with the experience. And it really got me thinking in like how my work could actually be impactful in corporate, even though when I was in corporate, I thought it was forbidden.
Totally. So kind of going back to
Full circle.
exactly, and seeing it in a new light, being able to be playful and creative with the corporate environment as well.
Yeah.
Right.
So TBD. We'll see what comes out of it.
Yeah. Next Rise and Flourish Summit.
Right.
Great. Lastly, on a personal note, what is your favorite self-care routine or ritual today?
Breath work specifically. I do this 8-minute breath work meditation.
What an epic conversation. If you want to get in the room at the next event, make sure you head to raisingwildhearts.com/rise. You'll get on the early access wait list. And so you'll be the absolute first to find out when we host our next event. Head to raisingwildhearts.com/rise. Can't wait to see you in real life. If you want to connect with Stasia or listen to The Most Important Thing, I will link all those down below. Of course, if you're new here and you're not following along yet, it's a great time to follow the podcast on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your shows. And until next time, go love someone well.